Hey everybody, in this video I want to talk with you a little bit about raw meat. Is raw meat healthy for the human diet? Are we meant to eat meat? Most raw foodists will talk about meat, but I've found that there's really not a whole lot of easily accessible research that I've found for eating raw meat. And I know when I first started on my raw food journey, I wasn't convinced that humans were vegan. I was eating the standard American diet, and I was still brainwashed into thinking that humans are meant to eat meat and that we're omnivores and that meat is part of the human diet. So when I read 12 Steps to Raw Food, which was the first book that I ever read on raw foods, although it wasn't the first time I had thought about a raw food diet, I read a book called Everything You Need to Know About Enzymes, and that's when I first thought about an all raw food diet, but I never knew anybody was actually doing it, because in that book it talked about how when you cook food, it destroys the living enzymes, and that if you eat whole, fresh, raw foods, that they have their own enzymes, they're more easily digestible, and it's a lot less work on your body. So that's my first thought. Okay, so if I ate nothing but raw food, I could probably extend my life for the longest period of time possible. But I never knew there were other people doing it. I never knew that I wasn't even sure if it could actually be done. And then about a year later, I read a book called 12 Steps to Raw Food, and that's what really made me go get into raw foods. But when I read the 12 Steps to Raw Food, like I said, I still wasn't convinced that humans were vegan. Every time I looked up raw foods, it was always raw vegan food, always raw vegan people and raw vegan information. And I assumed all these people were raw vegans more for ethical reasons. I didn't think that it was really healthy to be vegan. And so I had a lot of questions, and I wanted to learn more about raw meat, because the idea of raw made complete sense to me, but I figured that, okay, raw meat would be good. That raw is great, but I feel like meat should still be incorporated in the diet. So for the first month and a half that I went raw, I was still eating raw meat, and I was still eating raw cheeses and things like that, which I now know are terrible. But I was just still convinced, and I couldn't find a whole lot of anything about raw meat and what it does to the human digestive system, if it was optimal for people. I still assumed it was, and I still tried to do all the research I could on raw meat, and I still was eating raw meat. And I'm sure there's some people out there who were like me, and they heard about the raw diet and they had a lot of questions, and they're not so sure that humans are meant to be vegan. So I definitely wanted to make this video to give the evidence that we are meant to be vegan, and share with others my experience coming from the point of thinking that we were supposed to be omnivores, and that raw foods with the raw meats is optimal. That's what I thought, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that still believe that, so I just want to clarify a few things in this video. So like I said, I was eating raw meat for probably a month or two when I first got started with the diet, and even I actually gave up raw meat before I even thought that it was not good for me. I just sort of intuitively gave it up, because after about a month and a half, I was still kind of eating it a little bit, but I was a little afraid not to eat it because I just had all these ideas in my head that were omnivores and it's optimal, but really, and the taste and everything else, that didn't bother me. You know, most people think of raw meat and think it's disgusting, and I was thinking purely of my health, and I thought that it was optimal. And to me, it was just like eating sushi. It wasn't a terrible taste. Sushi used to be my favorite type of food, and the raw meat, it tasted a lot like sushi. So the taste and the texture and stuff like that didn't really bother me when I was first eating it. But even when I was eating it, I was still adding like herbs and spices and things like that to give it more taste, which is one sign that it's probably not meant to be eaten by us in its raw natural state. If it disgusts you and if you feel like you need to add to it to eat it, then it's probably not a human food. But like I said, even before I did any of the research and the studies on how raw meat is bad for the human body, we're not meant to eat it. We're not biologically or physiologically designed. Our anatomy does not match that of a meat eater or an omnivore at all. Our biological makeup matches that of a frugivore meant to eat mostly fruit. But even before I found any of this out, about a month and a half after my diet, I kept eating raw meat even though I didn't feel like I needed it. I didn't even really want it. I wasn't craving it. I lost basically all craving for meat after about a month into the diet. And I was still eating the meat because I was scared that I wasn't going to be optimally healthy without it. But one day I was going to get some raw meat and I was going to have it for lunch, and I just looked at it and was like, I don't want this. I haven't been craving it at all. I don't feel like I need it. I feel better when I just eat the fruits and salads. When I was first starting out, meat just lost all appeal to me completely after about a month and a half while I was still eating it. And that's when I started to do more research into veganism and are we really supposed to eat meat, because I always thought that we were. I would hear about raw veganism, and like I said, I just assumed they were doing it for ethics and that it wasn't really optimal. But once I gave up meat is really when I started to do the research, because I was like, this doesn't even appeal to me at all. So then I started finding all this out, that we're not meant to eat meat. I watched the documentary Forks Over Knives, and that was evidence enough. Started reading some of the China study, and just started watching more raw vegan YouTubers that were talking about the benefits of raw veganism. And once I gave up meat, I just felt a lot lighter. I felt that my digestion was improving. I felt that I was more clear-headed, and it just felt like a step in the right direction, like I was just evolving on my diet. But for everyone out there that thinks that we are meant to eat meat in its raw, natural state, I know where you're coming from. I felt the same way, and I just know from experience, my intuition, my body, that was the biggest sign for me. You can do all the research you want. You can look at all the data. You can find whatever argument you can come up with, but to experience it and feel it for yourself, that was the biggest thing for me. My body and my intuition didn't want the meat, so I got off it, and I felt a lot better. And then once I did the research and stuff like that, it was like so mind-blowingly obvious that we're not supposed to eat meat. It's just, if you do a little bit of actual, newer studies that are done today, pretty much any nutrition study done today is going to tell you that meat is carcinogenic, it's acid forming, and we're just not meant to eat it. And pretty much any nutritionist doing a real study today is going to tell you that we're meant to have plant foods. We thrive on plant-based foods. So I just wanted to share that little story with you guys about my journey on raw foods, how I got started, and that I was eating meat in the beginning. I'm going to make more videos on meat, more specifics on why we're not supposed to eat meat, because I really didn't even scratch the surface here. I just wanted to share with you guys my experience and my knowledge from going through it firsthand, and hopefully it'll help you guys out. But I'll be making more videos. Thank you guys for watching. If you like it, please like it and subscribe, and I'll talk with you soon.